Hi everyone. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Susanti. I graduated from engineering at NIT Trichy in 2017. I studied metallurgy and I'm currently doing my master's in the US. So I'll go into it a bit more in detail, but I want to first say that like this session is going to be really interactive as you are doing your applications. I'm hoping it's very helpful. So I would really appreciate if you can unmute yourselves and like share whenever there's some question or there's anything that's asked, or if you have any doubts or questions, like feel free to share. I also want to say that I can speak Tamil, Hindi, and English. So if you are finding any of this like challenging, if you want more explanations, let me know if you want me to like explain it in Tamil or say it in more detail in Hindi or something. I can try to do that also. Okay, so let's get started. Oh, So, again, welcome and a very happy new year to all of you. And I know it's late on a Saturday evening for you, so I'm excited to like meet you here and work with you in this hour. We have quite a lot to cover because research is a bit like elaborate and extensive. So I'm just going to go through it a bit fast. But I want to tell you that today we'll start with like a short game. Then we'll go into what is research and why do we do research, and also then understanding how exactly do we do this research, right? So as I mentioned, you can always like share your questions, but I also have some time towards the end to answer your questions. Can I just get some response from you all? Like maybe I just want to hear your voices, like either say it in the chat or type something in the chat or say hi or something, just so that I know that there are like people here. I know
Hi,
Harshavardhini
ma'am.
put a message. Yeah, okay, you don't need to call me ma'am. You can call me Sushanti. So that's that. And yeah, just maybe any emojis or any reactions, that's also fine. If you think I'm speaking a bit fast, you can also turn on captions if like on Zoom, if that's helpful. Okay, for the next slides, I or the next game, I'll need you to be more interactive actually. So, what we're going to be doing is a very, very simple game. So, the moment you have to unmute yourselves and basically say what you see on the screen. So, in this case, you just need to name the color on the shape that you see, but you have to be really fast. Um, should we do an example? Do you want to say what this is on the screen? Anyone? Okay, so I see you are all are putting it in the chat. Can you like unmute, like all of you can unmute in this, it's fine. It need not be one by one, it's a group activity. So you can just like unmute and say it. It's better if you all say it together.
The color which I was seen on the screen was red.
Okay, nice. So you just need to say like what color it is. Just say red or like whatever color. But I think the game is more fun if more people say it, which is kind of why I'm like asking more of you to unmute, but we can try. Okay, I'm gonna move us along. What do you see?
A lime circle one.
Okay, you see a lime. Okay, you see do I others? Okay, what color is it that you're seeing on the screen?
Yellow, ma'am.
Yellow? Okay. Keep yourselves on unmuted itself. I think it will be good if we can do it together. So the moment you see it, just shout out the answers that you can see, okay? And Sivaprakash, thank you for putting it in the chat. Can you also unmute and maybe say it out together? Okay. Next.
Green.
Green. Okay. Next.
Blue.
Blue.
Okay.
Orange.
Orange. Pink.
Pink color, ma'am.
That's really nice
Pink.
that Okay, great. So the game in other situations is that most people, unlike you guys who have been like smart enough to catch and say pink, most people usually say white. And the idea is that the way we think and the way we usually act are, we think it's the same thing, but they're usually very different things. And that's kind of what I want to highlight with this activity. But you guys are really smart and you caught that it is pink. So this is called a Stroop test. And this is usually done. You can check it out online, that this is a game that's usually played to show how what we think and the way we actually act is often very different. Okay. Thanks for participating, Lakshmi Narasimhan, Harshavardhini, Prakash. I think it was really great. You're one of the few audiences who answered it correctly. In a lot of cases, people say white. Um, Okay, so a quick introduction to me and to make sure that you understand who you're like listening to. My name is Susanti. I graduated from NIT Trichy in 2017, where I studied metallurgical and materials engineering. After which I realized that engineering was not really for me when I kind of switched out to study liberal arts, and then have 4 years of experience working in this nonprofit organization called Ideas 42, where I applied behavioral science to challenges that people in India and South Asia face in agriculture, education, governance, etc. I'm currently a researcher based in New York City, where I study. I'm also studying, doing my master's in design for social innovation. So I want to first start off by asking you, what does the word research mean to you? And on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being I don't like research at all, to 5, I really like research, how do you feel about the term and the concept of research? Can You can answer or put it in the chat. I'll give you about like a minute to do that. If any word comes to your mind when you think of research, even if it's like it's so hard or like it's challenging, you can put it in the chat.
Ma'am, research means, according to me, gaining knowledge about something. If you are looking deeply into the matters, so we need to get to know more about it, ma'am. So I mean to do that.
That's nice. Yeah. You're absolutely right. That is what research is. Anyone else, if you want to share it in a different language, that's fine too. Swapnali, is there something in the chat?
I don't see anything.
Okay. Oh, okay, I've got some messages. I have a message from Lakshmi Narasimhan who says it's a 3 and it's time consuming. 100% agree. Yeah, it is really challenging and like time consuming. Okay, so why are we here and what is research? Before we go into research more deeply, I think there's also an answer from Sivaprakash. is creating or making something new from earlier knowledge we have. That's so nice. You're like really right about that as well. Um, okay, so because you have like some kind of fundamental understanding, let's talk about like why are we here in this session and what does it mean for us as like applicants to the JSPF um, process? Why is research important? So research can be used in like three different components, according to me. One is like for your for the community essay where you're writing it, research can really bring out like more depth. It can make you think from the point of like others who you are kind of talking about in your applications. The second, for your project abstract, I know you're like supposed to be giving design, so kind or like ideas. So what research will help you go into more detail about each of these. And also, as you qualify through the process, there's the Changemakers challenge where you will be meeting in person to do some of these projects. So research will come into handy even there as well. So I'm hoping that what you learn through this session is useful for you through the application process and beyond as well. Okay, so like most of you said, research is the creation of new knowledge systems or kind of using what we already have. Like I think Shiva Prakash was saying, or that you kind of use what you already know to create new systems of knowledge. So research can be many different types. It can be like technical, it can be product oriented, it can be engineering, it can be even behavioral, which is the research that I'm more familiar with. So it's the process of kind of digging in deeper into situations and trying to understand and be curious about like what's happening. It usually starts with a question about like, something that's got your mind and there's a question, and then you do the process of finding answers to that is typically what is research. Just give me a second. Okay. So when we say human-centered research, what is it? What do we mean? So while all research is supposed to be about people or it is related to people in some way, human-centered research puts real people at the center of the process, kind of making you think about who the challenge is for, what is their aspirations, what is their needs, how do they make decisions. It's kind of a process of putting the person who is at the center of your issue or your challenge a bit more deeply. And this is kind of what our session will be most focused on. It's kind of trying to see if the way you've been thinking about your applications, the way you've been doing research, is that human centered, or like what can the human centered research process add to your applications is what we will be going through during this session. So this is the question, right? Like, why do we care about human-centered research? So this book called Invisible Woman, where it talks about how um, women have been always been missing from like the research process or like the development process, how women have always been like ignored. It talks about how for example, in product research, like the development of seat belts and cars, how testing is often done with like the idea of a standard male body, as a result of which it is found that women in situations of accidents have been found to be like 47% women have been found to be in like more risk of accidents than men. And one of the reasons which have been identified as a result of that has been because of the way the seat belts have been designed. So you think that seat belts are like, everyone wears seat belts, but something that has been designed, it was always designed with like a male's body, right? So the female's body is different with like different features, different weight and height combinations, as a result of which like something like a seatbelt is not doing the job it's meant to be doing, or in fact becomes more harmful for many women. So if you notice, like women often sit in front of the seat more than men, so the capability of the seatbelt, the crash test, all of that is like really dependent. And not just women, even like a basic characteristic like say women being pregnant, these are often not considered in research. So the idea of human-centered research is to ensure that the people who you're designing for, or whatever designs you're eventually proposing through your process, those are more comprehensive or more inclusive of the people that will be eventually using your product, or like your whatever it is, like a product or service. So it's to ensure that like it's not causing any harmful effects for people. Um, are you with me? Is there like any question that you're having? You can like maybe react through show some emojis or something. Okay, great. I'm going to move on, but I'm hoping there are no questions. If there are, please let me know. So, why are we doing this? Like what we spoke about, it's kind of like trying to make sure that the challenge and the solution you're proposing, those are more interlinked, that the solution you're giving is like addressing the challenge that we started out with. And to also make sure that it's not like what you're working on is not just a challenge for you, it's for everyone else as well, or the challenge you're working on has wider impact. And again, like centering the user experience, like trying to make sure that okay, got it. So it's also trying to make sure that, like, the people who eventually need your solution or who will be using your solution are more involved in the process itself. And as we saw earlier, like about bias itself, I'm not sure how, do you know what bias is? So bias is like something people naturally have, but we think we don't. It kind of lets you make decisions in ways differently. So bias is something that also you can address through using like human-centered research. Um, okay, I'm going to move us along. I know the slides are a bit text heavy at the moment, but it's also meant for you to kind of like look through it after you've completed like different stages of your process and then kind of um, just like use it as a checklist almost to see if you have covered many elements of this in your research process. I know we've spoken about like why research is good, why it's needed, but you're probably having this question of like, how do we do this, right? Like, how do we do research? Um, so a researcher, in my opinion, needs to be a few things, but most importantly, needs to be one person, someone who's just curious and like willing to try, who's willing to like um, try and fail is kind of one of the key marks of a researcher. But along with that, you need to be like an observer, a listener, sometimes like even a detective, kind of trying to look for these points where like there is scope for understanding it more, a problem solver and also a project manager in the sense that you need to go from one stage to another as well. But is there like I know it might sound really confusing, but there is a stepwise approach that human-centered research or like design research generally follows. But this I would like to share that this approach is fairly like common across any kind of research that you do, like even if it's something that you're building or if it's some engineering challenge that you're facing, it probably is the same way. So the process typically starts with first defining the challenge, like trying to understand what is the challenge that is what is the challenge that you're trying to solve. The second step is going a bit more in detail, like and who is affected, why is this challenge happening, what are other people saying about this challenge. That's kind of the second phase of research. The third is like the ideation, which is how do I address this challenge that I have identified, right? Like I want to kind of go into it in more detail. And fourth is like building out your solutions and really like just testing it with people who will be using it. And yeah, so I'll go into this a bit more in detail, like now through each of the steps, because for your JSPF application, I'm guessing more realistically, it's the first three stages that you will be using a bit more. So I'll go into that a bit more in detail. But again, before that, I want to stop here and ask you, what's your research about that you're doing for JSPF for your applications? Like, can someone volunteer some challenges that you've identified? I'm told that the deadline is on January 18th. So I'm sure you're probably far along in the process. So if some of you can share any examples, that would be really great. Anyone, what's your issue or challenge? All of it's the same thing. So issue, challenge, problem. What have
Like
you identified for your project?
I have a
Yeah,
problem
go
of
ahead.
finding a legit source. There are like so many sources in the internet. Even sometimes like ChatGPT is
Okay.
giving like so much wrong informations, which
Mm-hmm.
misleads
Okay.
us.
Okay, so we'll go into that a bit more on like how do we do this research. So thank you for sharing that. Can I ask you what is the issue you're or like what is the subject area that you are like trying to understand more about?
Actually, for my project, I have thought to do something like movable solar panel.
Okay.
I, but it is giving less energy, like to operate that servo motor even. I cannot get energy to operate the servo motor with that movable. So I need to
Okay.
do
Okay.
something about it. So I think I should change my project now. I cannot get any other ideas. I have tried
Okay.
something, but I cannot move. With that amount of energy I'm getting from the solar panel, I cannot operate the servo motor which I am using with the Arduino. There is no point of doing the project, I think.
Okay. I think like one thing you can probably try to understand is like what is the like challenge you're trying to solve, right? Like what you have given is kind of like a solution, which is something you're building and you're like it's not working really. But I think for the purpose of your application, it's more of the process also that needs to be documented. So you can like really talk about how you went about like building the device itself that you're talking about, or how are you doing these tests to make sure that like it's like the energy levels, etc. You can like definitely mention that as part of the process, and that's kind of my understanding. But I would like try to ask, why did you design this, or like what is the device supposed to be addressing, what's
Basically,
the
I
problem
have
that the
thought
device.
to improve the efficiency of the solar panel by like directing it towards the
Okay.
sun. But in
Right.
turn,
Okay,
I need
got it.
some energy to operate that servo motor to turn that solar panel is greater than what I get.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So
So
actually, it's like
like what
decreasing the
Lakshman, yeah,
efficiency. So it's
I
decreasing the
understand.
efficiency.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Okay. So you think it's not like working, but I would say the
Yes,
process of
ma'am.
like kind of developing it itself is like pretty good. So while you keep attempting, I would say take a look with respect to how much time you have, if you can like really build something out. But the process you have and the learnings you have are probably like, really good. So that's
If
definitely
I
one.
thought to
And
do more effective, it's like high capital cost. I should invest around like 14,000, 15,000 for like some little amount of energy. It's like 1,000 rupees per watt of energy. It's like more, not like cost effective.
understood. Okay. Okay. So you brought up some really great points. I'm going to like go into this a bit more in detail. Thank you, Lakshmi Narasimhan. Anyone else who wants to share, like, I think he mentions the challenge of like solar panels. If I'm not wrong, solar panels being not effective as the challenge that he has identified, and that he's kind of like trying to work through that. Anyone else who wants to talk about, to want to share like your challenge, like you maybe like hold on to your designs, but like what is the challenge you are trying to solve? Or what is the situation you're trying to improve?
Hi, ma'am.
Yeah, hi.
Ma'am, I'm Harshvardhani. Ma'am, I'm really interested in developing apps, ma'am. So I decided to do the project related to somewhat of the technical, ma'am. So that's why I thought to develop an app somewhat very much useful for our daily life, ma'am. So I decided to create an app to overcome the present limitations, and my topic is related to the cyber security, ma'am. So we want to do
Okay.
something related to that, because ma'am, nowadays we are getting more calls and all, ma'am. So this is a major issue we are facing today, ma'am. So that's why I decided about that, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I think both of your challenges are super interesting. So maybe I'll just kind of invite you all to think about this a bit more. So you like, I think naturally our tendency is also to kind of first think about like what is the solution, or like, what is the solution we are trying to solve. The first step in like a research process typically is identifying the challenge. So in this case, like where you say you started with like, I want to design an app, but like eventually slowly you went back to kind of like saying that cybersecurity is a big challenge. There are these spam calls that's getting like really annoying for people. So I would say start with that challenge, right? So with many of you, if you're trying to apply the research process and become more coherent with it, start with like identifying a challenge or what is the situation that you're trying to improve. And that's kind of what Albert Einstein also said, that if he said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. It's like the idea is essentially that you need to kind of look through and try to understand the challenge a bit more, to kind of come up with like great solutions that effectively like work on addressing this challenge. So let's talk about this. It's and like what you were saying, because of our ability as like engineering students, as students who are participating in a competition which is like at a particular time, typically it's better, or even at organization levels, the first step starts with like defining a problem at the right level, right? So you can like look at these three examples that we have here. A challenge should be really framed in such a way that you can take some action out of it, right? So the first example, if you look at, it's like girls education requires improvement in India, right? Do you think that's a good problem statement? If any of you can answer, that's great, or I can just move us along. So the issue is that this problem statement is like too broad and unclear about what action is needed. So if you say girls' education is a big challenge in India, like who are the girls who are involved in this? Who is being affected by it? This is like typically the questions that you have to ask of like any challenge that you're really framing, and like what action is required, because you can do so many things to improve girls' education, right? Like what is it really needed? If you look at the second example, which is like girl students of class 7A in like ABC school in T Nagar, Chennai, are not attending classes regularly, this is like too narrow and too specific, in the sense that you're not sure if like, okay, this ABC school has this problem. Does like BCD school also have the same problem? You don't know that, right? Like, and that's kind of the second challenge with respect to framing it appropriately. But if you look at the third one, which is essentially secondary school students in Tamil Nadu or at this particular age often miss classes, experiencing learning loss. So you have it like try to frame your challenge in a way that's more clear about who is it really affecting, and like what are the issues that are coming as a result of this. For example, taking the same cybersecurity, like what is um like spam calls we all know are annoying, but what happens as a result of it? Is it that people are like their time is being wasted? Is it that they feel they're more open to scams, like x number of people have got scams? So try to substantiate your challenge with like information to kind of convey that this is like really important to solve, right? So that's kind of what the idea of like forming a problem statement is. So in this the first phase, we kind of go into like defining a challenge and doing some research around it as well. So, how do you start? And many of you have probably already covered many stages of this. The first is like just to understand the background of like what is being said about this in previous research, what are existing findings around this, and what is missing. So, how can you, as an engineer or as whatever your skill or like your focus is, how can you add value to this particular challenge, right? That's kind of what we start with. The second, understanding about the challenge itself a bit more. Is this widely prevalent? Try to use data points or insights from actually engaging with people who may be experiencing this challenge a bit more, and try to understand what are the consequences of the challenge. Like the with the cybersecurity example, like how many people are affected by it on a day-to-day basis, like how many spam calls really go out, or like if you say I want to improve solar efficiency, who is it really affecting? Like whose lives stand to be better if you improve like, solar efficiency. So try to think about your challenge, not just from your immediate point of view, but slightly more to the extent of trying to understand who is this challenge for, what is the effect of it. And thirdly, try to focus on understanding who is at the center of this challenge, right? Who are the other people involved in this? Also try to think, why are you interested in this? And are there some aspects that are really working well that you can build on? So it's often said that instead of like reinventing the wheel and kind of coming up with something entirely new, which is great if you can come up, but a lot of times it's also said that the we're not always like inventing new things that already probably exist somewhere. So in terms of like getting started with research, I would say there are like these three aspects, which could be like first starting out with just understanding the background, right? And then also understanding who are the people involved. So if we say solar efficiency could be improved, are there people who are like, who are the people who are affected by this particular challenge? Is it people who don't have electricity and can like be better with solar, or is it people who already have bought solar panels in their houses and set up these, but it's like not very effective and it's not worth the cost? So try to be clear about who your challenge is addressing, because we all know broadly all challenges are important, but it's your responsibility kind of in the application process or in the project to kind of tell someone, this is really important, you need to pay attention to it, right? So try to do that as much as possible in your work. So I'll give you here an example of a project that I was working on a few years back. So this is like a school in Delhi, where one of the challenges was that they came to us, and like we were students then, we were volunteering here, and then they were telling us that students often like don't pass their exams here in this particular school. And one of the reasons they were saying is that they were absent for many days. So how do you start with framing a challenge? Like you could have eventually gone with saying, you know what, like try to give them like more classes or try to give them more specific material. Maybe they would have helped, but after like speaking to students, then speaking to teachers, trying to understand literature available on this, we kind of found that like hygiene is a big challenge in many schools in this particular part of Delhi, as a result of which people were falling sick and hence not attending school. So kind of try to understand, why is your challenge happening? Or like, why, if you say efficiency is not happen if a particular efficiency is not happening, try to understand why that's the case. Like, what is the specific reason for it? So in this case, we found female students in class 6 to 8 at a school in Jahangirpuri were experiencing hygiene challenge, which caused a 20% reduction in class attendance and affected students' learning outcomes. So try to add data figures to kind of mention that, like, so many hours of classes are missing, or so many days are missing as a and or so many people are affected by it, and that's why this challenge is like really important to solve. um, so before we go into research, which is kind of the part that Lakshman Narasimhan, you were talking about, which is that you're not sure about what the sources are, I want to stop again and ask if like anyone else has any questions. Do you want me to explain something again? I know this is a lot of information for many of you, but yeah, I'll just pause again. Even if you can share about your challenges, like any challenges that you're working on, that would be great too. Um, like if you want to add to what Harshavardhani and like Lakshman Narasimhan was saying in terms of like challenges, that's pretty great too. Okay, I'll go into this then. So when we like I've given you a few questions to think about, but how exactly do we go about addressing these questions? There are two most common ways of doing research. One is like secondary research, and the other is primary research, which you probably already familiar with. So the secondary research or literature review is a method of like looking at what others or existing information and data are available on the issue and kind of trying to synthesize or put that together, right? So you can look at government statistics, articles, academic papers, data sources, etc. And like what Lakshmi Narasimhan was saying, many of you are probably using like ChatGPT to answer this. But like the challenge with ChatGPT, in my opinion, also as a student, is that like the sources are not always accurate. It kind of pulls from really different sources. So I will say use websites like Google Scholar, or like even if you look at Google, try to look at cited by as a way to see if the article is like peer reviewed, or how many people have really used this particular article before and cited it in their work, as a way of like trying to understand if something is like legitimate or if it's probably not. I would definitely urge you to like do one more level of research after your initial ChatGPT searches, because don't stop with that. Try to look at some of the resources it's giving you. Don't like it's better to at least go through multiple resources before you come to like a conclusion. That's one. And the second is primary research, which I'm not sure how much time you have to do, but if you do have time, I would definitely encourage you to do it, because it's like really, really valuable. And primary research is typically research that you, as a researcher or as a designer or as a person just interested in this, you collect through different means. So you can, and typically what you do is like you have some findings from like your secondary research. You use primary research to verify it, to support it, and say that, what people are saying is very different from what is coming up in these resources and articles. So this is what I'm going to be proposing. So you can do this through multiple ways, which is kind of what I will go through. But again, like most importantly, if you're doing secondary research, which I definitely encourage you to do, always remember to like cite your sources, uh, because you don't want to be in risk of plagiarism, which is copying someone's ideas and words and presenting it on your own. So I would definitely encourage you to cite. There are ways to do citations which you can find on these websites like Purdue OWL and Citation Machine. You can just kind of put in the articles that you're looking for and get it. But typically it's better, it's highly recommended, and I've been told that it's also it's a requirement in your JSPF project abstract to like mention citations. So don't just like kind of put the link saying I have like looked at it in like in a submission, but feel like you definitely have to mention it. There are formats for doing this and different styles of doing citations. So pick a style like Chicago or MLA. If you go on these websites, you'll have more information. But essentially, you should have the name of the author, the year of publication, whether it's an article or paper, and the link to it if needed. So it can't just be like a link if you haven't read an article. Just please be mindful of this, because you don't want to be caught in plagiarism, which is like a big issue in academic circles. So, how do you do primary research? You can do many different things. Like, as I mentioned, this is highly encouraged if you have some time. So, for example, doing interviews, doing focus group discussions, doing short surveys, having games that you can really play with people and test. So, different, or like many of you are doing experiments and product testing, like what Lakshmi Narasimhan was saying. Like, I'm trying to build this thing and I'm trying to test it. But in fact, it's like, it's not becoming more energy efficient, but it's increasing it, which is a valuable learning, right? So, try to do this as much as possible. And in Harshavardhani's case, maybe like talking to people who are experiencing these spam calls. Like you and I have also experienced it, but maybe you and I have that technical ability to say, this is scam. But like some other people in your area itself might not really know and might have like lost money or might have lost time. So try to like speak to others as well who may be experiencing the challenge that you are talking about in your projects. And typically this is like a must in human centered research, because this is the way that you can actually bring people into the research process. So I would like really encourage you to do it in as much capacity as much as possible. So have any of you kind of like reached out to people, conducted any interviews as part of, or like done any primary research as part of your process, your JSPF application process?
No, ma'am. Um, No primary research methodologies, ma'am.
Okay, if you have time, I would definitely encourage you and like also tell you to add their quotes or what people are telling you. So definitely try to do it if you have time. And because I'm sure it kind of it will add a lot of value to the work that you're doing. So try to do it if possible. So, putting everything together, what you already know, what have you read through secondary research, what is available through data and research. So, it's not always about like what is the most impactful as well, right? You need to do something that's really interesting to you. Like Harshavardhan was saying, I'm like interested in like learning about apps. So, like also there's a component of what excites you, but try to kind of use that in a way that's like addressing a specific challenge or trying to meet a particular like trying to see if what you're addressing through your apps or whatever it is that you're building has like relevance as well. So once you put all these together, you have a really well positioned um, uh, a challenge statement. So typically I'll leave this with you, but try to understand that like your problem statement would be really valuable if it has who is involved, what is the issue, why is this important to solve, or like why does this issue exist, and impact. What happens? Why is this issue worth solving? So this is something to just keep in mind. And you'll see when once I share the deck after, you'll see some checklists. So once you have a problem statement, you have a challenge ready, like solar panels are not efficient, right? And I want to improve it. Then try to run it through this checklist and ask with some questions to see if you can like improve some parts of it. Okay, and I know we're almost at time, so this is going to be really quick. This is about designing. So try to frame your designs, right? Like you can start with a statement, like how might we use a particular design approach to achieve a specific income, specific outcome. So in this case, like of the case in the school I was telling you about, we started with understanding how might we encourage female students to wash their hands regularly to ensure that they have better hygiene and better learning outcomes at school. So once you frame it like this, you'll have more clarity about why are you doing something and what is the impact it's going to have. So this again ties back to the issue of like linking your challenge statement and your solution really closely. So it's not like I'm going to be using apps, but you're going to be using apps to do what, and how is it really linking or addressing the challenge that you have identified, right? So that's kind of the point of like having a design statement like this. And how do you do it? You usually start with just brainstorming, like this is so probably a very common image that you have. So try to list as many solutions you want. So like apps are one thing, but also try to include like, should I make an information poster about it? Should I make like something, should I make a game about it? So try to have as many ideas, like do some really wide brainstorming and then kind of filter out with respect to like who will use this. Do you see any challenges? Do any of this have like negative outcomes? For instance, like people doing seatbelt design, if they had done this process of filtering and narrowing, they would have probably realized that this particular model is like it's a bit negative for women who will be using it, or say women who are pregnant. It's going to be really negative. So it would have considered pushing them in a different design direction. So the approach is not to say that you can only do designs which are like filtered and narrow, but how can you improve the quality of the design idea you're proposing for your application, right? That's really important. So even if you're giving, that's kind of why I thought the approach of what Lakshmi Narasimhan was doing, like of having this new tool which kind of tries to improve efficiency, but it's not fully successful, but that's okay. It shows an output, and so you can actually mention that this is a problem, I'm trying to address it through X, Y, and Z methods, or these are approaches that I'm trying differently. So like I would say kind of try to definitely like think through your design a bit more in terms of validating it, because that's something that's definitely going to be asked in like your interviews or in your processes. And so in our case, we kind of did this really simple thing. How did we do it? We spoke to teachers, students on what would be most useful. We identified that people didn't know exactly how to wash hands in like the most comprehensive way, and access to soap was another issue that we had found out. So we went on, and in my group that we did this research, some people were like really good actors and some were doing art. So we were like, how do we put all this together? So we created like marketing partnerships to make sure that soap is available. We conducted workshops with students, so we had them kind of, we did activities where they would like do different stages of hand washing, and then we asked them to like write it and draw these things. And teachers were also asked to like remind students to wash their hands before the break, right? So this was kind of what we had done. It still could be really improved, it could do so many different things, but this was the approach that we had. Again, like a design checklist, that once you have a design, once you have built your app, you have an idea for an app, try to like run it through this and check. Um, so yeah, a couple of you have shared designs. This is again like an option. If any of you wants to share your design that you have come up with, we can kind of workshop through that as well. உங்களுக்கு ஏதாச்சும் டிசைன் இருக்கா அது பத்தி பேசணுமா? அது வேணும்னா சொல்லுங்க. Okay, so this is for, I just put this together based on it's like a bonus checklist again, which you can like look through as you're writing your essays or your prompts. Like try to understand, this is like, try to understand these questions or try to answer them as you're like writing your applications to kind of strengthen them. This is like, I want to caveat by saying this is not from the interviewers or anything. This is just from my perspective of doing research. So I would like really you can use it if you feel that it's useful. And yeah, okay, we're at the closing of the session. So I just want to say that research, I hope some of you are kind of like feel better about research. I don't know how much that's the case because it's a lot of information, but research is an intuitive process. I just hope you kind of take away that it's, if you're curious and if you're open to like trying different things, if you're open to trying and failing, that's great. And that's the most important skill needed for like a researcher. You need an open mind and a curiosity, and that can really set you apart. And like you meet and engage, I would definitely like highlight this so that your research is not just about, or the challenge you're working on is not just about you, but try to see and try to engage with people who are affected by this issue and try to see how their perspectives, their needs, their interests can be factored in more. Always asking questions like who, what, why, when, and how at every stage of your process. That's like really important. If you can, it's much easy to say that, like, you know, having one quote from a person who is like, say, elderly, who experiences scams and is probably like affected by it, is more is like more not valuable, I'll say more impactful than like having a statement like senior citizens age 50 and above in Tamil Nadu experience scams, right? Like you can see the difference versus like, say, an older person telling you, I lost my money with this, and like, you know, I saved this for so many months and I lost it. So you can understand the difference really between like showing instead of like you explaining and summarizing things. So that's something. And this is kind of what I was recommending with your approach, Lakshmi Narasimhan, is like show the process. The outcome is important, but the process is also important. So if you have done some research, you have done some testing, like feel free to mention that as well. And yeah, like try to see what's a good story that you can tell about like your work, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to like position yourself really well, and storytelling is super important. But yeah, I know this was really overwhelming, but there's so much more to research. And yes, if you have any questions, you need any clarity on, I'm around. But thank you for your time today. I know this was like really fast, but I hope it was useful in some way and you're able to take away at least a few things. I'll share the deck after the session and you have the recording as well if you want to like go back, slow down, whichever way it is.